I still remember the autumn of 2009 like it happened yesterday. The air in Brent Hollow had that damp, heavy feel it always carried when summer gave way to falling leaves, when the trees stood half bare and the wind carried the smell of wet earth. I was 9 years old then, living with my mother in a crumbling duplex on Maple Street, the kind of place where paint peeled from the siding, and neighbors argued loud enough for the whole street to hear. My mom, Dana, was a nurse at the county hospital, and she worked nights more often than not. Money was tight. So tight that every light bulb we didn't use, every grocery bag we stretched a little longer, was noticed. That also meant babysitters. Most of them were the kinds of people you'd expect in a neighborhood like ours. Teenage girls from church saving for their first car, or tired women from down the block who'd watch me while their own kids played in the background. They weren't perfect, but they were safe. Then there was Carla Ray. Carla was 21, older than most of the girls who came around. With dark hair she bleached in streaks and long nails painted in neon colors. She wore hoop earrings the size of bracelets and had a laugh that sounded half like a dare, and half like she was in on a joke no one else could hear. The first time she came over, she strutted into the house like she owned it, dropping her bag on the couch, popping her gum, and smiling at me like we were co-conspirators. My mom hired her out of desperation. I could see it in her eyes when she introduced us. Dana was exhausted from pulling double shifts, shadows like bruises under her eyes. Her nurse's scrubs wrinkled. Carla was cheap, available, and didn't ask questions. At first I wanted to like her. She told stories about concerts she'd been to, about sneaking into places she wasn't supposed to be, about people she'd dated who sounded like characters out of a movie. When you're 9, that kind of confidence feels magnetic. She painted her nails at our kitchen table, the smell of polish burning my nose, and told me I could pick a color when my mom wasn't looking. For a while, that was enough to make the nights less lonely. But it didn't stay that way. Sometimes Carla disappeared into the kitchen for long stretches, saying she had to make a call, though the smell of smoke would drift back into the living room. Other times she'd pace the hallway, mumbling, laughing at things no one had said. Once, when I asked her to heat up dinner, she shoved a bag of chips into my hands and told me not to be such a nag. Then there were the whispers. "You ever hear voices in this house?" she asked me one night, crouching down so close I could see her eyes darting back and forth like she was chasing something invisible. "I swear someone else lives here. You just don't see them." I wanted to tell her to stop, that she was scaring me, but the words stuck in my throat. I curled up on the couch instead, pretending to sleep while her shadow moved across the walls, tall and restless. I didn't tell my mom. At 9, you learn fast which problems your parent can solve and which ones will just make their lives harder. Mom already had too much to carry, so I stayed quiet, even when Carla's visits began to make me dread the sound of the front door closing behind my mother as she left for work. And then came the day Carla didn't show up at all. It was a Wednesday, gray skies leaking drizzle that soaked through my shoes as I waited on the school steps. Carla was supposed to pick me up. My classmates had already scattered, parents' cars driving off one after another until I was the only one left sitting there, hugging my backpack like it could keep me warm. Minutes stretched into hours. My stomach growled. Every headlight that passed made me flinch with hope, then sink with disappointment. I imagined Carla strolling up, chewing gum, shrugging like she'd just overslept, but she never came. By the time my mom's headlights cut through the rain, it was full dark. She pulled up fast, panic written all over her face. I ran to her, and she hugged me so tight it hurt. "Where's Carla?" she demanded, scanning the empty street. "She never came," I whispered. That night, Mom was furious. She called Carla's phone over and over, each time hanging up with her jaw clenched tighter. Finally, she slammed the phone down and swore Carla would never step foot in our house again. For a few weeks, life felt steadier. Mom arranged her shifts differently, found an older neighbor to watch me sometimes, and made sure I was never left waiting. I felt safer. I believed her promise. Until the Friday Carla came back. I spotted her before she saw me leaning against a dented car outside our duplex. Her lipstick was smudged, Her smile stretched too wide when her eyes landed on me. "Hey, kiddo," she called, waving like nothing had happened. "Miss me?" I froze on the sidewalk. Something about her voice made my skin crawl. My mom said, Yeah, your mom's mad at me, but I've got surprises. Hop in, let's grab some ice cream, just like old times." I hesitated. Every warning my mother had ever given me buzzed in my head. But Carla's tone was light, teasing, like an older sister daring me. Against my better judgment, I climbed into the car. That was the night my childhood ended. Carla didn't drive us to the ice cream shop. She took me to a decaying apartment building across town. The hallway stank of mildew, carpet squishing with every step, as if the floorboards had soaked up years of spilled drinks and fights no one cleaned up after. Inside, the apartment was worse. Piles of dirty dishes, blinds ripped halfway from the window, clothes strewn across the floor. The smell was sour, heavy, like something rotting just out of sight. I sat on a sagging couch clutching my backpack while Carla busied herself in the kitchen. At first, I thought maybe she'd really just forgotten the ice cream. Maybe she'd laugh, grab her keys and take me home. But then a glass shattered. She screamed, at no one. Cabinets slammed, her voice swinging from laughter to rage in seconds. "Do you hear them?" she whispered suddenly, crouching in front of me. Her breath reeked of chemicals, her pupils blown wide. "They're in the walls, don't move." My heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I wanted to run, but the door was locked, and Carla was between me and escape. Minutes dragged on like hours. A man shouted upstairs. A woman screamed back. Somewhere, a baby cried. Carla paced the room muttering, then sat beside me, her hand gripping mine too tight. "It's just us now," she said softly, her smile trembling. "Your mom doesn't get it, but I'll take care of you." I nodded because what else could I do? My fingers ached under her grip. I felt smaller than I'd ever felt before, and all I could think was, Mom doesn't know where I am. Meanwhile, my mother was tearing through the town in panic. When she got home that night and found the house empty, she called every neighbor, every friend, even the police. She didn't know where Carla lived, but someone at the hospital mentioned spotting her car near an old apartment complex. By the time the patrol car pulled up outside, I was still trapped on that couch, Carla sitting beside me with a bottle in her hand. The knock on the door startled us both. Carla's eyes went wide. "Don't answer," she hissed. But the knocking grew louder. Then came the crash of the door breaking in. Officers flooded the room. Carla screamed, lunging at me, but rough hands pulled her back. "Stay away from her," she shrieked as they dragged her out in handcuffs. I was crying so hard I couldn't breathe. A female officer knelt in front of me, her voice gentle. "You're safe now, sweetheart. We've got you." My mom burst through the doorway moments later, her face streaked with tears. She pulled me into her arms and I buried my face in her shoulder, shaking. Carla was charged with neglect, endangerment, and attempted kidnapping. I never saw her again, but the damage she left behind stayed with me for years. After that night, I was never the same. Every creak in the house made me jump. Every shadow stretched too long. I couldn't be left alone without feeling like Carla was somewhere nearby, waiting. Even when Mom and I moved to a new home, safer and brighter, I still dreamed of that apartment, the broken blinds, the yelling upstairs, Carla's grip on my hand. I never told anyone about the whispers, about how she swore there were voices in the walls, or how her laughter twisted into something darker when she said, "It's just us now." Those were the things that haunted me the most. Years passed, and I grew older, but part of me always stayed 9 years old in that apartment learning the hard truth. Sometimes the people who smile at you, who are supposed to care for you, are the very ones you need to fear. And that's the memory I carry. Not a monster under the bed, not a shadow at the window, but a babysitter with painted nails and a crooked smile, who came back when she shouldn't have. If there's a lesson in it, it's this. Trust your instincts, even when you're young. When someone feels wrong, when their smile doesn't reach their eyes, listen to that voice inside you. It's not just paranoia, it's survival. Because evil doesn't always knock with a mask on. Sometimes it waves from the curb and tells you to hop in the car. I was 10 years old the night I stopped being afraid of storms and started being afraid of people. I grew up in Willow Creek, Minnesota, a small town that was more fields than streets, more silence than sound. Our farmhouse sat at the edge of town, 2 stories of creaking wood, chipped paint, and windows that rattled when the October wind hit just right. If you've ever lived in a place like that, you know the kind of loneliness it carries, the way darkness settles heavier when no one else is around. My name's Ethan Miller, and back then it was just me and my dad, David. My mom had left years earlier, chasing a different life in another state, and it was something we never talked about much. My dad was a truck driver, the kind of man who worked long hauls and came home with calloused hands and tired eyes. He did his best for me, I know that now. But back then, what I remembered most was how often he wasn't home when night came down. Usually that was okay. We had Mrs. Conway, our neighbor from 2 houses down. She was an older widow, with white hair always pulled into a bun, and a laugh that carried through her porch when she told me stories about her late husband. She babysat me when Dad was on the road. She wasn't family, but in a way she became the closest thing to a grandmother I'd ever known. The night everything changed, Mrs. Conway wasn't there. She'd fallen earlier that week and broken her hip. Dad told me the ambulance had taken her to the county hospital, and I remember the way his jaw tightened when he said it, like he didn't want me to know how worried he really was. That left him with a choice. He had a delivery he couldn't miss hours away and no one to watch me. I still see him kneeling at the doorway of our farmhouse, his big hand resting on my shoulder, his eyes trying to convince me of something we both knew wasn't true. "You'll be fine, champ," he said. "Just a few hours. I'll be back by dawn. Lock the doors. Keep the lights on. You're braver than you think." I nodded, even though my stomach felt like it was tied in knots. That was the last time I saw him until the next morning, and by then I wasn't the same kid anymore. The storm rolled in faster than the weatherman promised. By 7 o'clock, rain was slapping against the windows so hard it sounded like handfuls of gravel. The trees out back bent in the wind like they might snap. I curled up on the couch with a blanket wrapped around me, cartoons playing low on the TV, a flashlight within arm's reach just in case. I hated storms. The thunder always seemed too personal, like it was aimed right at me. But I kept telling myself what Dad said. Braver than you think. The power flickered once, twice, and then it was gone. Just like that, the house sank into blackness and the cartoon voices died in silence. I clicked on the flashlight, the thin beam shaking with my hand. Suddenly every sound was sharper. The drip from the kitchen faucet, the scrape of branches against the siding, the groan of the old house shifting in the wind. The storm outside howled like a voice calling my name. That was when the knock came. It was at the back door, sharp and loud, like whoever it was wanted to make sure I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard. My dad's warning echoed in my head. Don't open the door for anyone. I froze. Then came a woman's voice. Ethan? Sweetie? It's Mrs. Conway. Let me in, it's so cold out here. My heart hammered. Mrs. Conway. That didn't make sense. She was supposed to be in the hospital. Please, Ethan. The voice pressed, softer now, pleading. Don't make me stay out here alone. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe the neighbor who'd baked me cookies and told me stories was just on the other side of that door. I raised the flashlight, shining it toward the rain-streaked window, and that's when I saw the shadow. It was tall. Too tall. Taller than Mrs. Conway could ever be. Fear doesn't hit you all at once. It creeps up from your toes, freezes your knees, and settles heavy in your chest. I couldn't breathe. The shadow outside the window moved, slow and deliberate, and the voice came again. Ethan, sweet boy, don't make me wait. I bolted. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time, heart hammering so loud I could barely hear the storm. I slammed my bedroom door, locked it, then crawled into the closet, curling myself into the smallest ball I could make. Downstairs, the back door rattled. Hinges groaned. Whoever was outside wasn't knocking anymore. They were trying to get in. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep quiet. My flashlight beam shook against the closet wall. The house groaned again, only this time it wasn't the wind. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps across the wooden floor below. They were inside. Every board that creaked under their weight made my body flinch tighter. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Dad's words echoed in my head. Braver than you think. But bravery felt impossible when the footsteps climbed the stairs. They stopped outside my room. The doorknob rattled. I held my breath until my chest ached, praying, begging, promising anything to whoever was listening if only that door wouldn't open. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, a new sound broke through the storm. Blaring horns, flashing lights. Red and blue danced across my window. "Ethan!" My dad's voice roared from outside. "It's me! Open up!" The footsteps moved fast, pounding back down the stairs. I heard the back door slam open, then nothing but the storm and the sound of my dad's boots pounding against the porch. By the time police officers swarmed the farmhouse, whoever had been inside was gone. No broken locks, no footprints in the mud, no proof except the echo of a voice I couldn't forget. "Are you okay?" my dad asked, scooping me into his arms when I stumbled out of the closet sobbing. I clung to him, shaking so hard I could barely speak. It wasn't her. It wasn't Mrs. Conway. He looked at me with eyes that were both relieved and guilty, and he nodded like he already knew. For weeks after that night, I couldn't sleep without the flashlight in my hand. Every creak of the farmhouse sent me scrambling under the covers. The storm had passed, but the fear stayed. My dad tried to reassure me, saying sometimes storms made people imagine things, that maybe it was the wind or a trick of the light. But I knew what I heard. I knew the voice that had called itself Mrs. Conway, and I knew the shadow that didn't fit her frame. I never told anyone about the way it said my name, soft and coaxing, like it already knew me. As I grew older, I realized storms weren't the scariest part of that night. What haunted me most wasn't the thunder or the darkness, or even the footsteps in the hallway. It was the knock on the door I wanted so badly to believe was safe. That night taught me something I've carried with me ever since. Danger doesn't always show up wearing a mask. Sometimes it wears a familiar voice, one you trust enough to open the door for. And that's the part of growing up no one warns you about, the moment you learn the world can trick you with kindness. Trust your gut, even when your heart wants to believe otherwise. Because sometimes survival means listening to fear and knowing that not every knock at the door is meant to be answered. I still remember that February night in 2009 as if it's etched into my bones. Rockford was the kind of suburban place people passed through without thinking much about. A sprawl of aging ranch-style houses, cul-de-sacs, and corner stores that closed too early. It wasn't dangerous. Not the way cities on the news were. At least that's what my parents used to say whenever I admitted I hated being left alone with babysitters. The truth was, the house itself was what I feared. At night, every corner felt alive. The old furnace wheezed like it was breathing under the floorboards. The rafters creaked like footsteps pacing overhead, and the shadows always stretched just a little too far. My parents brushed it off as imagination, but I knew better. That night was supposed to be special for them, their anniversary. They'd booked a table at a nice restaurant downtown, one of the only times they treated themselves. My dad put on his old suit jacket, my mom wore a red dress, and they left the house buzzing with good spirits. Before walking out, Mom leaned down, kissed my forehead, and promised, "Sarah, it's just a few hours. Kelly will take care of you and Noah." Kelly was new to us, 17, tall with dark blonde hair she kept tucked under a beanie, and a smile so quick it almost seemed rehearsed. She'd been recommended by a family friend who said she was responsible and sweet. Maybe she was. But from the moment she stepped into our house that evening, I noticed how her eyes kept darting toward the windows, as if she expected something or someone to appear. At 12, I wasn't little anymore. I knew when an adult was nervous no matter how hard they tried to hide it. But Noah, at 6, was just happy someone would read him bedtime stories and pour too much syrup on his waffles. He took to Kelly immediately, and I envied that easy trust he had. The night settled slowly. Outside, snow drifted down, frosting the streets, making the whole neighborhood look like it was sealed inside a snow globe. Inside, Kelly dropped her backpack onto the couch, magazines and snacks spilling out, and said brightly, "Don't worry, I'll keep you guys safe." Her words should have comforted me. Instead, I felt a cold ripple move through me. Why say that unless she thought there was something to worry about? By 9 o'clock, Noah was asleep, curled under his dinosaur blanket, breathing softly. I stayed up in the living room with Kelly, watching a sitcom rerun on low volume. The house felt quieter than usual. Too quiet. I pulled the blanket tighter around me. That was when the power flickered. The screen blinked, the lights buzzed, then everything went black. Kelly laughed nervously. "Old houses, right?" she said. But her laugh didn't sound real. It was the kind of laugh you give when you're trying to cover fear. And then came the sound. A light, deliberate tap, tap, tap against the glass of the sliding back door. We both froze. At first, I told myself it had to be branches knocking against the glass, or maybe snow falling from the roof. But then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. Perfectly even. Perfectly timed. Kelly grabbed the remote and muted the TV. The silence that followed pressed against my ears. The tapping stopped. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then came the crunch of footsteps in the snow just outside. Kelly whispered, "Probably just the wind." But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands shook slightly as she reached for her phone. She hadn't dialed anyone yet, just held it, like a prop. I hugged my knees to my chest, staring at the sliding door. The yard beyond was empty, blanketed in white, the motion light glowing faintly. But I couldn't shake the feeling someone was out there, just beyond the edges of the light, watching. We waited. 10 minutes dragged by. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that maybe my mind had exaggerated it. I was almost ready to convince myself when another noise split the silence. This time it wasn't from outside. It came from the hallway. A slow, deliberate creak, the exact sound of the loose floorboard just outside my bedroom. Kelly stiffened. She forced a smile, her voice too bright. "Stay here. I'll check it out." I grabbed her wrist. "No, don't." My voice shook more than I wanted it to. But she pulled free, her face unreadable, and disappeared into the hallway. The shadows swallowed her whole. I sat there, staring into the dark, the seconds stretching endlessly. Then I heard it, a soft laugh. But it wasn't Kelly's laugh. It was deeper, male, coming from my bedroom. My whole body turned to ice. I knew I had to move. I tiptoed toward Noah's room, every step heavy with dread. My hand shook as I turned his doorknob. He was still asleep, his small face peaceful, unaware of the danger creeping just down the hall. I wanted to cry at the unfairness of it, how kids got to stay innocent while the world showed you its ugliness too early. I whispered his name. "Noah, wake up." He stirred, blinked, rubbed his eyes. "Sarah?" "Shh," I said, lifting him out of bed. His little arms wrapped around my neck. I tried to stay steady, but my heart hammered so loud I thought it might wake the whole house. That was when I saw it. In the reflection of the hallway mirror, I caught sight of movement. A man, tall and hooded, slipping silently out of my bedroom. My breath caught. Behind him, following close, was Kelly, and she was smiling. Not the nervous, polite smile she'd shown us earlier. This smile was knowing, almost triumphant. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop the scream that threatened to spill out. My babysitter, The girl who was supposed to protect us had let him in. I didn't wait to see more. I turned, dragging Noah with me, and rushed down the hall into the bathroom. I slammed the door, locked it, and pressed my back against the wood, gasping for air. Noah started to cry, confused and scared. I held him tight. "Shh, please don't make a sound." A second later, Kelly's voice floated through the hall, sing-song and coaxing. "Sarah, don't be scared. He's just a friend. We won't hurt you if you come out." The doorknob rattled, slowly at first, then harder. Then came the banging, heavy, deliberate. Wood groaned under the force. I clutched Noah tighter. His tears soaked my shoulder. The only thing I could think, over and over, was, "My parents have to come home. Please let them come home now." The pounding seemed endless. Each slam against the bathroom door vibrated through my chest, rattling my teeth. I pressed my body against the wood as though I could somehow keep it shut with sheer willpower. Noah whimpered. "Sarah, I'm scared." "I know," I whispered, stroking his hair. "I am too." The footsteps shifted outside, pacing back and forth. Kelly's voice came again, softer now, closer to a whisper. "You don't have to hide. We're not bad people. You'll understand if you just come out." Her words made my skin crawl. Time warped. Minutes felt like hours. Then suddenly, as quickly as it had started, the banging stopped. The house went silent again, except for the storm outside. I strained to listen. A creak, a shuffle, then nothing, and then headlights. The glow swept across the bathroom window, cutting through the dark. Tires crunched on the driveway. My heart leapt. My parents. The front door opened, voices calling out, muffled but real. My mother's laughter, my father's low tone. Relief surged through me so fast it made me dizzy. The intruder's footsteps pounded suddenly, retreating fast toward the back of the house. A door slammed open. By the time my parents rushed down the hall, throwing open the bathroom door, the house was silent again. Kelly and the man were gone. They never caught her. That was the worst part. The police came, combing through the house, noting the muddy footprints trailing out the back door, the abandoned backpack Kelly had left by the couch. But she and the man had vanished into the snowy night. My parents replaced the locks, installed cameras, and promised me nothing like it would ever happen again. But even at 12, I knew there were no guarantees. The world didn't hand you safety just because you were a kid. For weeks, I wedged a chair under my bedroom doorknob before sleeping. I carried a flashlight everywhere, even to the bathroom. Every creak of the floor made me jump. Every shadow felt like it was stretching toward me. Noah bounced back faster. Kids do. But I didn't. Not really. That night changed me. It wasn't just the man in the hallway or the sound of his laugh. It was Kelly's smile, that awful knowing smile, and the way she whispered that he was just a friend. Because the truth I learned that night is one I've carried ever since. Sometimes the danger isn't outside your house knocking at the door. Sometimes it's already sitting in your living room, smiling, while your parents drive away. And if there's a lesson in that night, it's this: be careful who you trust with your safety. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a friendly face. I was 14 the first time my parents left me alone overnight. Up until then, they always made sure somebody checked in, a neighbor dropping by, a cousin staying over, something like that. But that Saturday in November, it was just me in the house at 27 Birchwood Lane. Portland in late fall can feel like the edge of the world. The days shrink early, the air turns sharp, and when the sun sets, it swallows the town whole. Our colonial-style house looked picture-perfect in daylight with its white trim and shutters, but when the night came down, it became a creaking, echoing labyrinth. Every hallway stretched too long. Every doorway looked like an entrance to something waiting. My dad was away in Boston for a conference, and Mom, a nurse, had an overnight shift at the hospital. I tried to shrug it off when she kissed my forehead before leaving. "You'll be fine, Daniel. You're old enough now. Keep the doors locked, don't answer the phone if it's a stranger, and call me if you get scared." "Mom, come on," I said, trying to sound annoyed, trying to be a man instead of a kid. "I'm not little anymore." She smiled at me like she wasn't convinced but didn't push it. The door shut behind her at 6, and I was officially on my own. At first it wasn't so bad. I ordered pizza, sat with my laptop, played some games. The wind scraped branches against the siding. The furnace groaned like usual, and I told myself this was no different than 1,000 other nights. But as the hours stretched, that illusion thinned. The rooms seemed hollower. The quiet grew heavier. Even the way the refrigerator hummed felt menacing, like it was filling up the silence too much. By 10, I was curled on the couch with a blanket, my laptop balanced on my knees, when I heard it. From the basement. At first, it was faint. A dragging sound. Something heavy scraping across the concrete floor. I froze, fingers stiff on the keyboard. It came again. I muted the laptop, heart pounding. My mom had always told me the basement pipes banged when the weather turned cold. But this wasn't banging. This was slower, heavier, like something, or someone, moving down there. I slid off the couch and crept toward the basement door, which sat in the narrow hallway off the kitchen. The brass knob felt icy under my palm as I turned it. The door opened with a groan. The smell hit me first. Damp, earthy, like wet cement. I peered down the stairs. The chain pull light swayed slightly, back and forth, though no one had touched it. "Hello?" My voice cracked in the silence. No answer. I stood there for a long moment. My stomach twisted into knots before I slammed the door shut and locked it. Back on the couch, I told myself I was overreacting. Probably a rat, maybe the wind, but the unease gnawed at me. I turned the TV on loud, trying to drown it out. Then came the sound I couldn't mistake. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, climbing one step at a time. I bolted upright. The sound stopped. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I ran to the counter, grabbed the cordless phone, and dialed my mom. Straight to voicemail. "Mom, it's me. I think someone's in the house. Please call back." The doorknob rattled. Once, twice, like someone was testing it. I dropped the phone and grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find, whispering to myself, it's fine, no one's here." But I didn't believe it. I didn't dare stay near the basement door. I took the knife and bolted upstairs to my room, dragging a chair against the door after I locked it. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the knife. I texted my friend Tyler. "Think someone's in my house. Please don't tell anyone. Just stay awake in case I need you." He texted back instantly, "Dude, call 911. But I couldn't. Not yet. What if it really was just the pipes? What if I got in trouble for making a scene? I sat on my bed, knees pulled up, the knife balanced across my lap. The wind rattled the windows, and every creak of the old house made me flinch. Somewhere around midnight, I must have dozed off because I woke to a new sound. It wasn't coming from the basement anymore. It was in my room. A faint scraping. Slow, deliberate. Coming from the closet. I sat up, heart in my throat, staring at the narrow door across from my bed. The sound grew louder, like nails scratching the wood from the inside. I gripped the knife so tight my knuckles ached. The closet door creaked. And then, slowly, it eased open. I jumped to my feet, ready to scream. But the closet was empty. My clothes swayed slightly, as if someone had brushed past them. I stayed awake the rest of the night, knife in hand, eyes locked on that closet. When the sun finally rose, I felt like I'd survived something ancient. My hands were stiff from clutching the knife. My throat was raw from breathing too hard. At 7, I heard my mom's car pull into the driveway. I ran downstairs before she even opened the door. "Daniel, what's wrong?" she asked, instantly reading my face. "There was someone in the basement," I said, my voice breaking. "I heard them, I swear I heard them." She tried to calm me down, brushing my hair back like when I was a little kid. But then she went to the basement. The light was still on, and the window, The one near the ceiling that we never used was wide open. Muddy footprints tracked across the cement floor, leading straight to the stairs. Her face went pale. She called the police immediately. They searched the house, combed the yard, but by then whoever it was had vanished. "Probably a break-in gone wrong," one officer said, jotting notes. "They realized someone was home and left." But I knew better. Break-ins didn't sound like footsteps climbing toward you. They didn't scratch from inside your closet. I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever it was hadn't just broken in. They'd been waiting. After that night, everything changed. I begged not to be left alone again. My parents never said it out loud, but I think they felt guilty for leaving me in the first place. We got a security system installed, added motion lights, even replaced the old basement window with one that couldn't be opened. But none of that fixed what was inside me. For months, I couldn't sleep with the closet door shut. Every night, I swore I could hear faint scratching, so I'd get up, fling it open, and stare into the darkness until my eyes watered. Nothing was ever there. But I never shook the feeling that something had been. People always talk about monsters being imaginary, about shadows being tricks of the mind. But the truth is simpler and scarier. Sometimes the monster is just another person, someone you don't know. Someone who decides your home is the place they want to be. That night taught me something I wish I'd never had to learn. Safety isn't guaranteed by a lock or a promise. It's fragile. It can be broken with a single open window. And the scariest part? Sometimes the only thing standing between you and the dark is the sound of footsteps climbing toward your door. You're never as safe as you think you are. Locks, alarms, even parents' reassurances can't erase the truth that danger can find its way inside. The lesson isn't to live in fear, but to never ignore the instincts that tell you when something feels wrong. I never thought I'd be the type to run off into the woods alone, but that summer made me someone I barely recognized. Emily and I had split 2 months before, and our apartment turned into nothing more than 4 walls and echoes. Every night I'd come home, dump my keys on the counter, and the silence would swallow me whole. It was worse than fighting. At least when we fought, there was noise, evidence that I existed in someone else's life. Now, the stillness mocked me. Friends tried to drag me out. Dinner, drinks, weekend hikes. But every time they looked at me, I could see the pity under their questions. "How are you holding up? Do you think you'll get back together?" It wasn't conversation. It was an autopsy of something I wasn't ready to dissect. I got tired of repeating the same lies. "I'm fine. I needed this." So I hatched this idea that maybe a weekend of solitude would help. If silence was going to smother me, I might as well choose the kind of silence that came with fresh air and trees. I picked a remote spot along the Deschutes River, a place I remembered from a fishing trip as a teenager. A clearing big enough for a tent, shaded by pines, close enough to the water that the constant rush might drown out whatever else kept clawing at me inside. Packing was simple: tent, sleeping bag, canned soup, fire kit, flashlight, and my dad's old .38 revolver. He'd given it to me with one of his trademark lines: "If you're ever where nobody can hear you scream, this'll get you back home." I'd only ever fired it at paper targets, but I packed it anyway. Something about going into the woods alone makes you prepare for things you can't name. The drive from Bend was 3 hours of winding roads through forest so thick the sun barely touched the asphalt. When I finally pulled up at the trailhead, golden light spilled through the pines, and for a moment I almost believed this was the peace I needed. I hiked down with gear on my back, found the clearing, and pitched my tent by the water. That was when I noticed them. Across the river, maybe 50 yards downstream, were 2 men, 30s, maybe 40s, with the look of guys who'd spent their lives outdoors. One was tall, with a shaved head and broad shoulders. The other was stockier, with a beard that made his face hard to read. Their blue pickup sat crooked among the trees. They waved when they saw me, polite enough, but their eyes lingered longer than felt right. I waved back, forced myself to focus on my fire, my tent, my little patch of solitude. But the unease didn't fade. It clung like the smoke from my campfire. By sunset, I was sitting cross-legged, eating canned soup from the pot, when the tall one shouted across the river, "You out here all alone?" I froze. I could have lied, pretended I was meeting friends, but the fire crackled loud behind me and my one-man tent sat in plain view. "Yeah," I admitted. He grinned, teeth flashing in the half-dark. "Brave. Not many do that anymore." His friend muttered something that made him laugh. Then they turned back to their fire, leaving me with the uneasy feeling that I'd given them more than just an answer. That night, as I crawled into my tent, I told myself it was fine, just fellow campers, just curiosity. But the question echoed in my head until sleep finally took me. "You out here all alone?" The next morning, I woke to sunlight pressing through the nylon walls of the tent. For a few seconds, I let myself believe it was just another camping trip. Birds chirped, the river rushed, and nothing in the world felt dangerous. I stepped outside, stretched, and lit a small fire for coffee. That was when I caught sight of them again, the two men standing on the bank across the river, rods in hand. They weren't fishing, though. They were watching me. I tried to ignore it, pouring coffee into a tin cup. But when I glanced back, the taller man raised his phone. Click. The sound carried. He took a picture of me. No smile, no wave, no explanation. Just the shutter snapping before he shoved the phone in his pocket. My stomach knotted. I told myself maybe he was taking a picture of the river, of the scenery. But I knew better. I spent the afternoon trying to distract myself. I walked upriver, skipped rocks, even wrote a few notes in a battered journal I'd brought. But every time I turned my head, I imagined eyes on me, watching, measuring. As the sun fell, shadows lengthened. I built another fire and cooked soup, but my appetite had vanished. Across the river, their fire burned too, brighter, larger, like a signal. I couldn't see their faces clearly in the flicker, but I could hear their voices. Laughter, murmurs, something that sounded like my name. By 9, I doused my fire and zipped into the tent. The river's steady hiss filled the silence, but it didn't calm me. Every sound outside became a threat, branches snapping, pine needles crunching. My hand stayed close to the revolver. Around midnight, the sound came. Footsteps. Not across the river, but here, circling my tent. I froze, heart thudding. The nylon walls trembled as someone brushed against them. Then, a shadow leaned close. "Hey," a voice drawled. The tall man's voice. "You awake in there?" I gripped the revolver tight, sweat slicking my palm. Silence seemed the only defense. He chuckled, low and flat. "Don't worry, I just want to talk." The nylon pressed inward, his hand maybe inches from my head. My throat went dry. "Back away," I managed, voice cracking. "Now." Another laugh, this one colder. "Or what? You'll shoot me?" The sound of metal tapping wood followed, rhythmic and deliberate. A hatchet, I realized, though I never saw it. I fired into the air. The blast cracked the forest open, scattering birds, echoing downriver. For a moment, silence followed. Then I heard him step back, slowly. And then nothing but the river again. I didn't sleep. Not a minute. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. As soon as the sky turned pale, I packed up camp in a frenzy. My hands shook as I stuffed the tent into its bag, half-folded my sleeping bag, threw everything into the duffel. When I looked across the river, the campsite was empty. No fire, no men, no truck, just silence. I should have felt relief, but it only unsettled me more. They'd left without a trace, and I couldn't convince myself it was just coincidence. I hauled my gear back to the car, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. The woods were too quiet, as if the world was holding its breath. At the trailhead, my car sat untouched, but on the tree beside it, carved deep into the bark, were 4 words. Even was here. The letters were fresh, wood still raw and pale. I swallowed hard, scanning the tree line. No movement, no sound. just the sense that I was being watched even then. I drove straight to the ranger station, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. The ranger listened, scribbling notes while I told him about the men, the photo, the footsteps. "We'll check it out," he said, too calm like he'd heard it all before. But folks carve names in trees all the time. Could be unrelated. Unrelated. That word clung to me like a curse. That night, back in my apartment, the silence was worse than ever. The hum of the fridge, the drip of the faucet, every sound turned into footsteps circling me again. I slept with the revolver on the nightstand, and when I dreamed, I heard the voice. "You awake in there?" Weeks passed, but the fear didn't fade. I tried to convince myself it was just a bad encounter, an ugly coincidence. But then came the texts, unknown numbers, short messages. "Out here all alone. Brave. Ivan was here." I changed numbers twice. The messages kept coming. I stopped sleeping. Every creak in the apartment sent me gripping the revolver. Friends noticed the bags under my eyes, the way I jumped when someone said my name. I told them I was fine. The lie had become reflex. But inside, I knew the truth. Out there in the woods, something had shifted. A line had been crossed. I hadn't just stumbled into their camp. They had chosen me. It's been years since that weekend, but I still don't camp alone. I still can't sleep without a flashlight burning in the corner. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night, certain I heard footsteps circling my bed, and I stay frozen until dawn. Emily never came back, and in some ways I think it's better that way. Whatever darkness I carry now doesn't belong to anyone else. I've never seen the two men again, not in person. But every time I step outside, I scan crowds, parking lots, forests, wondering if one day I'll catch a familiar grin, a pair of empty eyes. The worst part isn't the memory of that voice outside my tent. It's the knowledge that out there in the wilderness, safety is an illusion. Locks don't exist. Neighbors don't hear you scream. It's just you, and whoever decides to step close enough to whisper through the nylon. Trust your instincts. Don't ignore the unease. Don't explain away the warning signs. Because sometimes danger doesn't announce itself with fangs or claws. Sometimes it just asks a question in the dark. "You awake in there?" I never thought I'd end up in a house that made me question every decision I'd ever made. Jenna and I had started our home staging business 6 months ago, doing the usual. Condos in the suburbs, little split levels where the biggest problem was a tacky wallpaper or faded carpet. Nothing ever prepared me for Ashford Street. Lillian Grant's call came late one Friday. She sounded nervous, almost afraid, and explained that her grandmother's Victorian home had been abandoned for years. "Nobody wants it," she said quietly, "especially the upstairs. Visitors always leave unsettled." I laughed at first. Victorian homes were quirky, but unsettling. That was exaggeration. Jenna, of course, took the call seriously. She's always been cautious. "We'll take a look," she said. I didn't know if it was courage or curiosity that made me agree. When we arrived, the house towered above us like a relic from another century. Its paint peeled in long strips. The wraparound porch sagged in one corner, and the windows, though intact, seemed to stare. I parked on the cracked sidewalk, taking a deep breath of the humid Charleston air. Something about the house pressed down on me, a heaviness that wasn't just from age or neglect. Stepping inside, the air was thick with dust, damp wood, and a faint metallic tang I couldn't place. Jenna whispered, "Creepy, right?" But her voice rang hollow in the empty halls. I forced a grin, though the cold settled deep in my chest. The living room was a disaster of old furniture and yellowed sheets. I pulled one off a love seat, and a cloud of dust hit me in the face. Then I saw it, faint handprints smeared upward toward the ceiling. Too wide for a woman, too high for a child. My stomach tightened. Jenna moved past me, pretending not to notice. "Probably just old family antics," she said. but her hand trembled slightly as she brushed a layer of dust from a small side table. I nodded, trying to calm the sudden rising panic in my chest. The kitchen was worse. Cabinets sealed with heavy padlocks, a refrigerator duct-taped shut, crusted remnants of something long gone. "Why would anyone do this?" Jenna muttered. I didn't answer. The smell of old food and decay was faint but real, and my imagination ran wild with scenarios. By the time we reached the stairwell, I realized the first story was almost safe compared to what lay above. The hallway stretched long and dim, a single dusty bulb flickering overhead. One door bore hundreds of tally marks, another scratched with frantic words. "Help. Hungry. Please." I tried to laugh, to brush it off. Probably just someone trying to scare teenagers. Jenna didn't respond. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white. "Or not," she said, eyes wide. We paused at the farthest room together, feeling the chill of a house that had been sealed from life and light. What awaited us upstairs would change the way I thought about vacant forever. The room smelled of rust, old medicine, and something else I couldn't name. Leather restraints hung from a bare mattress, the kind used in medical facilities, and the wood bore deep grooves from struggles long past. A metal tray lay on the floor, rusted tools scattered beside empty pill bottles. I wanted to leave immediately, but curiosity anchored me. Jenna's breath came fast, shallow. I grabbed her hand. "We shouldn't be here," I whispered, but she was frozen too, staring at the bed as if it had spoken to her. Then it moved. A subtle creak. The straps pulled taut for a second, then slackened. Neither of us moved, both terrified to breathe. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps echoed above the floorboards. Someone, or something, was coming down the hallway. "Did you see that?" Jenna's voice was barely audible. I don't know what I saw," I admitted, my hands shaking. The steps grew closer. I realized we hadn't checked the other rooms. Maybe it was just the wind, maybe not. My rational brain shouted at me to leave, but fear rooted us to the spot. Then a figure appeared at the top of the stairs, bent, dragging a leg, leather restraints swinging from wrists and ankles. It didn't rush. It didn't stumble. It simply descended, each step groaning under its weight. I grabbed Jenna. "Go. Now." We bolted down the stairs, tripping over the edge of a rug, slamming into the front door. I yanked it open, letting the humid Charleston air hit us like a wave. Lillian stood across the street, arms crossed, watching. She didn't flinch when we ran past her. "I told you," she said softly. "No one ever stays upstairs long enough to see her." We didn't stop running until my car's engine roared to life. Every glance in the rearview mirror made me flinch, expecting to see the figure at the top of the stairs. In the car, Jenna tried to speak. Who was that?" she asked, voice shaking. "I don't know," I admitted. I think it was her, the woman who lived upstairs." Lillian had been reluctant to speak, but after my repeated questions, she confessed the unthinkable. Her grandmother, Eleanor Whitman, had been hidden away for years, restrained under the guise of care. She'd died in that house 6 weeks prior, but someone had continued living there, cashing checks and maintaining the illusion of life. I couldn't breathe. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles whitened. The thought of that figure descending the stairs, following us from that room, it made my stomach churn. We called the police. When they searched the house, the rooms were empty. No bed, no tools, no restraints. It was as if the upstairs had never existed. The officers murmured about squatters and theft, but I knew what I had seen. In the days after, I couldn't shake the images of that stairwell. Every shadow in my apartment reminded me of the bending figure. Every sound of leather against metal made my pulse spike. Jenna was the same. We spoke in hushed tones, avoiding the subject when clients called. We returned to stage smaller homes, but Ashford Street remained lodged in my memory. Even the smell of dust or damp wood triggered a visceral reaction. I began sleeping with the lights on, imagining that figure silently following me down hallways I thought were safe. Sometimes, late at night, I swore I could hear it. A dragging footstep, a faint metallic clink. Rationally, I knew it was impossible. Logically, it had been gone for weeks. But my body remembered what my mind tried to forget. Years later, I still carry the memory of that house. Every Victorian home I pass makes my skin prickle. Every empty upstairs hallway calls to me. I learned a lesson about curiosity, courage, and limits. Some doors should remain closed, some floors unexplored, some secrets left untouched. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It's knowing when to walk away, even when the unknown calls you forward. Jenna and I survived Ashford Street because we listened to the instinct screaming at us to leave. Not everyone does, and sometimes the house remembers those who enter. Even now, if I hear leather creak or metal clink, I freeze. Because Ashford Street and the figure I saw on those stairs will never truly leave me.